I've been conversing with a few viewers to this channel recently, and the same theme has come up around how we deal with the decline of the modern West, the state of the UK. And I understand it's very frustrating witnessing what's going on, and it can drive some people to anxiety, depression, anger, all sorts of things. And some people out there I know say we should be angry, we need to get angry. I can only really agree with that if that anger is channeled in the right direction, exercise or hard work or something like that. But anger in and of itself, I think, can be quite dangerous. That's because there's a wildness to it. There's almost a search for mad justice. Now, when we have anger coursing through our system or anxiety or whatever else, it does impact us physically. It impacts your adrenals. And that can lead you to getting burnt out, you don't think as clearly, and so on. And that's probably my core issue with anger. You don't tend to see yourself when you're angry. I'm sure we've all been in that situation where we've acted in anger, which is a form of hell, really. And then afterwards we've been, we've regretted what we've said or done. And then we know at that moment we lost ourselves somehow. In that mad justice, we perhaps weren't as close to the truth as we could be. And I think it's realizing that we are suffering in that state, and those around us tend to suffer when we're lost in anger. Of course, we saw an example of it in the summer of 2024. I understand that many of our working classes in the UK have been betrayed. I understand they're upset. But a lot of that anger came out and developed into riots, and at times, that anger was being projected in the wrong direction. It was led to a state of people being out of control. And it led to a lot of violence. Now, of course, that's wrong. I've never said the riots were the right course of action on this channel. And you can see now, a lot of these people are getting the most brutal punishment. I mean, I was reading one in the week. Apparently, a couple of men were given sentences even though they didn't riot. They were just there. I think one guy was waving his arms or something and was given 21 months inside. Now, the riots in the summer are a good example because while they got out of control, at the root of them, there are real issues that need to be spoken about. Things like mass immigration, things like the safety of the British public. Who are we bringing in? The safety of children. Of course, Keir Starmer and his ilk don't seem to care less about the safety of British children. He doesn't even spoken on it. And because people got lost in this anger and acted out, it's been all too easy for the system, the media, the government to twist this into, if anyone's concerned about these things, they're just evil and far right. They just want to cause trouble. And of course, that means that they can just ignore these very, very important issues. They just get kicked to the curb again. And of course, that's an explanation of how anger can harm things on a meta level. But what about a micro level? Well, I think one of the main things here that I try and focus on this channel is reframing what's going on in the UK and the Western world. I think we all know we're in a state of decline. However, if you look into the traditionalist writers, a lot of them are quite prophetic and tend to be a bit more gloomy inherently. However, they tend to see history as a flow of cycles rather than a linear progression to, this ideal utopian state. They tend to think that civilizations are born and then they mature and then they have their time in the sun and then they eventually decay. But then they're reborn, and that process has to happen. It's part of life. It's the death and rebirth process. We even have that in our own personal lives from time to time. Someone I was talking to recently said he thought I had a stoic approach, and in some senses I suppose I do. However, my nature isn't stoic at all. I was very much a worrier growing up, and I'd had, like everybody, some hard experiences. There was a lot of violence for me in my early life. My older brother got lost in drugs and never came out. He died, actually, many years ago now, God bless him. And when that happened, it confronts you with thinking, look, I don't want to die as well. I have to figure out, how do you make sense of life? And I noticed a lot of people were struggling. Now, that led me to a sort of death and rebirth in my own life. This is why I don't just believe this stuff. I know this stuff is real. You really can have a sense of spiritual rebirth and see the world in a new way. I was a square peg trying to fit into a round hole for much of my early life. But then as I matured around my late 20s, 30s, life really started to make sense. And for me, I drew on three things as I tried to understand the world and how a man can grow. And this is a piece I'm working on in my Substack at the moment called The Three Fathers. And I think each of us in our lives can try and learn from this, in the sense of we need to have peace with our earthly father where possible. Some people have challenging relationships with their family, but the relationship between the son and the father is especially important. Now, I know it's not possible for everyone. Some people don't know who their father is, terrible relationships and that sort of thing. But where possible, that connection is very, very important. And with that comes the second father, which is our tradition. Understanding where you come from, what your values are, how they relate to your culture. This is something that's been really destroyed by modernity. And growing up in a city like Leicester, where I'm originally from, I would see that other people had a connection to their culture. The Indians had Hinduism. The Pakistanis had Islam. Even to an extent, the West Indians had a form of Christianity. But I noticed increasingly we had nothing. We were all materialism. So there needs to be something deeper that we can connect with, that gives us orientation, that makes us part of a bigger story, that allows us to see our struggles in the context of history. That has a calming effect on us. It also gives us people to follow, heroic figures from the past we can model ourselves upon. And then the final father is God the Father. Now, I know not everybody's open to this, so maybe it's not for you, but for me personally, I found that peace with being, you could call it, very profound. And that could be the sort of mystical relationship, if you like, that we can find at the core of life. There's a great teaching from Jesus that states, "No one who puts his hand to the plough and looks back is fit for the kingdom of heaven." And what he means there is, if we're just going to look over our past, analyse the world all the time, we're not going to get into the, quote, kingdom of heaven. What he means by the kingdom of heaven isn't so much the place where you go when you die. He means here and now. Resting in being, letting go of all of your thoughts and what you think you know, and just existing in a pure state of nature. That's very freeing. You might not even have to approach that truth via spiritual means if you're not open to it. You can approach it through nature, just walking in nature, forgetting the news cycle, getting away from it all, and just listening to the rhythm of the trees, just going with the pace of life. You realize when you actually listen to nature, the pace of life is slow. It's not fast like the news cycle, which tends to make us unhealthy. And I try and make a principle of once a week getting into that state, because it's very freeing. It's very good for you physically, mentally, and spiritually. And then, of course, the other thing I think that can help us is connection. This is what I'm trying to build on the Substack, of course, but a place where we can actually support one another while we go through these hard times in modernity, but also build something positive. Like I say, this death and rebirth is going on. However, we need to welcome that. There's no point standing in the way, but almost look to a new future. Of course, other ways we can find that connection: martial arts group, church groups, if you're that way inclined, or at least some form of spiritual groups where people have, something beyond the materialism of modernity, you could say. But as I say, this is very much what I'm aiming to build on the Substack. But the point I'm trying to get at here is we really do need to come from that place of truth and vision, I think, into the future. That will provide us with a lot of a better life and a better future, rather than simply falling into the negativity of the news cycle and the anger, which I think harms us more than helps us in the long run. So I hope this was useful to at least somebody out there. Do let me know your thoughts down below. Do consider joining the Substack as well. That's linked down below too. I think it's quite clear what I'm trying to build there now. And let me know your thoughts below this video as well. Do consider subscribing if you're new.